I never want to engage and have to kill a trafficker.
Mm-hmm.
They're children of God just like I am. But God's put me on that path to rescue this survivor.
This podcast explores stories of people who invest their lives to serve others. The topics and interviews in this show are intended to inspire all of us to live our best story so others can fully discover the kingdom effect. Hey guys, my name is Kevin Beasley and I'm here with Glen, also known as Buckley. So welcome to part 2 of episode 1 of the Kingdom Effect, and we are excited to be here. Last time we were on, if you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to that. We shared a little bit about Buckley's experience in law enforcement, which actually led into fighting for victims of sex trafficking. So very interesting story. Something we've been talking about the last couple weeks, and also something that I've kind of been wrestling with a while. I actually think I first wrestled with it when I was part of a podcast, kind of an observer of a podcast with Michael Chandler, who's a MMA champion, and just asking him and listening to him respond to a question about how can someone who is a man of faith, which Michael is a deep man of faith, how can he reconcile violence in the ring as a sport with faith? So there were some really great answers to that. But as I'm thinking about that, you kind of have a similar situation. You literally bust down the doors with guns a-blazing with a team of 6 or 7 people, right?
Yeah.
In hotel rooms at 2:00 in the morning to rescue women who are victims of sex trafficking. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So in that context, how do we just live in a society, especially a Western church culture, where violence is just not part of, or even fighting for someone physically is not part of our culture, spiritual faith culture. Yeah, it's fascinating to me that somehow you reconcile that. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
That's actually a really big question, and I hope my answer does justice. So the short answer to your question would be you don't think about it. It's kind of like you only see the end, right? So it's not a concern, maybe.
Yeah.
But, I've often thought about that, being in the military and law enforcement and, just being a believer my whole life. So, there's been times I've asked myself the question is, how do the Bible says thou shalt not kill, but yet all of my jobs as an adult, that's not been my job to kill people, but the potential to have to has always been there. And so nobody wants to take a life. No law enforcement officer, no military person. That's our job. That's what we've been called to do. So we're willing to do it, but it's not something that we're excited about to go do. I look at examples in the Bible, David and Goliath. You look at God calling these nations up to go and wipe out entire other nations. And I agree with you. I think we live in a culture now where Christians have kind of become passive when it comes to their faith. I guess the way that I reconcile it is, God's called me to go rescue these women, and God has given me through my past, my training with military and law enforcement and so forth. God has given me the tools to accomplish that mission, that He's given to me. And I never want to engage and have to kill a trafficker. They're children of God just like I am. But God's put me on that path to rescue this survivor.
Yeah. One thing is when you think about having to execute on your judgment on whether to use violence or not, I think what we tend to think about is that it's good guy, bad guy. And in a sense, that's right. But is there any sense in your mind that that person that's taking advantage of this other person is maybe a product of their past? Do you ever have love in your heart for someone that's doing bad things?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, the old saying, it's a little cliche, hate the sin, not the sinner. Man, we all mess up. whether it's, the little white lie to your parents as a child, or whether it's trafficking another human being. I mean, those sound so
Yeah.
extreme
Right.
on opposite ends of the spectrum,
Mhm.
but in eternity, they're not.
Right. Yeah.
And so you do want to have compassion for the bad guy.
Mhm.
And like I say, if we ever had to engage a bad guy
Mhm.
with violence, it's not because we're punishing that person. It's not vengeance. It's not you're a worthless person that doesn't need to be on the earth anymore.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I think that's the difference.
Yeah,
It's
we're
in your
engaging this person to protect ourselves,
Mhm.
to protect our team, or to protect that survivor.
Mhm.
If we have to engage somebody with violence, they chose that, not
Yeah.
us.
It kind of reminds me of another conversation we had, like rewind the tape a little bit in your life. You had told me that you were a pretty good what do you call questioner?
Oh, interrogator?
Interrogator,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
And that had to do with the fact that you really had some sense of compassion for this person you were questioning.
Yeah, fortunately, I learned early in my law enforcement career that yes, this is a bad guy, but they're a human being. And the more I treat them like a human being instead of a bad guy,
Mm-hmm.
the more compassion and empathy that I have for what they're going through, what
Yeah.
they've done, the better I was at doing my job.
Yeah. Which is not very different at all from the story you told in the last episode of Jesus and the lady, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that he did tell her to go and sin no more, but the fact that he cared for her as a human being opened her up to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I've sat across the table from many of people who have abused children or downloaded child pornography
Mhm.
or whatever. And when I'm sitting across the table from them, I don't know what got them to that point
Right.
in their life. And I think I learned that through the survivors of trafficking.
Yeah.
I'll use the word prostitution here. I don't like that word anymore because and this is I'm not going to explain why. When you hear the word prostitute or prostitution, automatically in your mind you go, "Oh, that's a crime, that's a sin. That woman is choosing to do that."
Mhm.
And what I learned from being in the trafficking world for so long, of all the women we rescued, I've never met one that just said, I woke up one day and decided I was going to go,
Yeah.
sell my body.
Yeah. Mhm.
There was always something that preceded that,
Mhm.
whether it was an economic situation, maybe their parents sold them into trafficking, maybe it was an addiction, something led them there. And it's the same thing with the bad guys.
Mhm.
Something got them from into this sinful nature,
Mhm.
into this lifestyle of sin and crime, and they will tell you their story.
Yeah.
If you genuinely want to hear their story and they see that, they'll tell you their story. And there's usually always something that happened. A lot of people that abuse children were abused as a child.
Yeah.
And so to hear them tell their story, and for me just to say, man, I'm so sorry that happened to you,
Mhm.
and be sincere about it. I am sorry that you were abused as a child. That's a lot of people see that as, oh, that's an excuse. That's condoning what they did. No,
Yeah.
it's not. He still pays the price for the abuse he inflicted on someone. But
Right.
man, that could have been the first time he's ever heard that.
Yeah.
Man,
And then that's not to say that they're responsible to make the right decision
Right.
moving forward.
Right.
But yeah, you really always, the way that I always say that, I say this a lot with a lot of different people on different levels, is we are simply, I always shouldn't say simply, I think it's more complicated than this. This is oversimplification, but at our heart, we're all products of our past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And from a faith perspective, we're all products from long, long ago when Adam and Eve turned and made the wrong decision. Right. It started there, but then from that point forward, we're all just products of our
Yeah.
experiences in our
What
past.
was it? My pastor said one time, I think he was preaching a sermon, why bad things happen to good people, right?
Yeah.
Or why does God allow these bad things to happen to people? And I may screw this up, and JB if I do comment with the right language here, but I think that bad things happen to good people because we do something that causes that bad thing, that bad consequence to come into our life. Someone else does something to us,
Right.
or the third is we simply live in a sinful, broken world that will one day be reconciled, but isn't right now. And so just the fact that we live during this time, bad things are going to happen. I mean, there's been a few times where bad things happen to me, and I remember being so mad at God and so, why'd you let this happen? And, all these different things. And then, as time goes on and, the Holy Spirit works on me and I go back and I see, okay, this happened because I'm a bonehead. I did something stupid,
Right.
or somebody did something to me, or it's something I just out of control because we live in a sinful world. And so, so I try to have compassion for the bad guys too. They need Jesus as much as anybody else. But yeah, back to the violence thing. If we were ever to engage someone in violence, then it's the other person's fault. Like they made us do that,
Right.
For whatever reason. As far as having the mindset, the willingness to do it, I think that comes from God. I think that comes from, hey, I've called you to do this. Me and the guys on the team said, yes, we'll go.
Yeah.
And I think he takes that from us. He gives us that mentality to be able to go to that place if we need to when the time comes. And I look again, I reference other stories in the Bible about people being violent. David and Goliath. I like David and Goliath. If I could do that with a slingshot, that'd be awesome. But then in contrast, man, there's this culture of passive Christianity. You have one extreme where you're willing to, engage in violence if necessary. And then you have the other extreme where, we're kind of living just by the red letters in scripture. And then there seems to not be a middle ground anymore.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Yeah. It's kind of like the masculinity and things like that have kind of been taken out of Christianity just by our culture.
Yeah, another thing I was thinking as you were talking, on the flip side of the coin, there's this perspective, there's this belief, there's this perception that we're better Christians if we keep ourselves safe.
Yeah.
Right? There's this self-preservation that we've adopted or embraced in the Western church, is like, I'm a more godly person if I make my life as safe as possible.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we talked last time a little bit about my experiences of going to Alaska, but post that 1996 trip and a couple of other trips, what we started doing down the road eventually is taking men on survival trips for 8 days at a time into the bush, 200 plus miles away from the closest, Walmart or street light or whatever. And when you take 6 or 7 guys out there in the bush, they're not safe for the first time in their life.
Yeah.
Like for their whole life, they've driven in safe cars. We actually like to spend more money on vehicles that are the safest, right? Safety is such a huge part of selecting a vehicle. So we want the safest vehicle. And we're driving down the interstate. You get off the exit and you go into your nice little safe neighborhood behind a gated community, and you hit your button and the garage door goes up, and you drive inside the garage door, hit the button again, it goes down. You're safe inside your home. You go in, you lock your doors at night. You check everything before you go to bed and wake up. And that means if I do those things, I'm a good Christian person, right? And if I keep my kids safe, if I don't ever put my kids in a place where they're out, not safe, then I'm a bad Christian.
Yeah.
And I believe that's against the heart of the Bible, the message of the Bible. Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friend,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much passion, and I don't maybe the word violence isn't right in this part of it, but there's just so much I don't even know if masculinity is the right word.
Yeah.
But there's just so much confidence. Maybe that's the right word. There's so much confidence in faith and being who we are and who God created us to be. But yet there's that, like you said, there's now this passive mindset, and it's I know some pastors that are friends of mine, and they're very vocal in their faith, and they're very, guys, let's take the fight to the enemy, right? The enemy being Satan, and let's take this fight to him. Like, pastors rise up, Christians rise up, and let's talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about because it makes us uncomfortable, and let's be warriors. Let's be who God's called us to be. And unfortunately, in my opinion, nowadays that's the minority of the Christian culture.
Right. Yeah.
The majority now is, hey, let's go to church on Sunday and go to our small group.
Yeah, I know. If you think about the New Testament, those guys, man, the ones that were actually living the first 100 years of Christianity, they were getting their heads chopped off and getting burned, burned at the stake.
Thrown in jail.
Yeah, totally. And in some circles, they say that's how we actually know that Jesus lived and died and was raised again, because people were willing to face that kind of danger and risk for their lives for the sake of the message, right?
Yeah. The first time I went to Africa, I'm not a big reader at all, but a 17-hour flight, I thought, man, I'm gonna read a book. So I'm being the good little Christian guy, and I go to Lifeway, and I'm looking for a book
on the bestseller rack or something.
No. I did have some favorite authors at the time, David Platt, Francis Chan, those guys. So I'm kind of in the Christian living section, and I'm definitely somebody who judges a book by its cover. And I saw this book called The Insanity of The Insanity of God. And I thought, man, that is a cool title. Like, somebody's calling God insane. I got to read this. And so I didn't even read the back of the book. I saw the title, and I saw that Platt wrote the foreword in the book. I don't crack this book open until I get on the airplane. So I'm somewhere over the ocean, and I'm opening this book, and it was written by a missionary whose family served in Africa, in Kenya. And it talked about all the persecution and things that happened to them. It was so dangerous where these guys were serving. Like, he didn't even use his real name in the book, And I just remember reading it, and I'm like, and I'm on a plane to this spot right
to
now.
that place where this
like, what's going on here? But to read in that book, he talks about other churches in other countries, in Asia and so forth, where people have to sneak around to read the word together, to worship together, and I remember playing a game when I was in youth group, underground church. But there are real underground churches today, and Christians that are persecuted daily. Still, things that you were just mentioning about guys in the New Testament, and we're just here in the U.S. We're just, faith is a right, and religion is a right, and worship is a right, which is great. But I think it's also taken away some of the value of it. When I remember being in Africa, and people walk, you probably hear these stories all the time. People walk for miles to go to church, and in a church that has no roof or is under a mango tree, or, and just to watch them experience seeing them worship, it's like nothing you see here. And so I don't know. I think that's also what I'm hoping comes through this podcast.
Yeah, same here. That's what I was thinking as well. It's like most of these people we'll talk to, and even the people that are survivors that we'll talk to, they had to come to a point where saving someone's life was more valuable than being safe.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you can actually rescue this person out of the pit of sex trafficking is more valuable to you than your own life.
Yeah.
And even more so than that, if we rescue someone out of sex trafficking, or whatever we do, if we give a kid an alternative to foster care, you may be making the next 30, 40, 50 years of their life more comfortable, but even more so is giving them life beyond life, right?
Yeah,
Giving them a
absolutely.
passageway into the eternity.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is more valuable than safety and security, which is not American. The
No, not
American
at
thing to
all.
do is to keep yourself safe, keep your kids safe. And that's one thing, like listening to you and um I think about this lady that she's mid 40-year-old soccer mom that like was raised in homeschool, went to a Christian college, was in church her whole life and safe and secure. And she is choosing to spend her Thursday nights in strip clubs in downtown Nashville to build a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with these women that are on the stage. Like she don't have to do that,
Right.
right? She actually she has trouble sharing her story in churches because churches say that might not be a good idea.
Right.
It's
What's the
not
whole,
safe,
yeah.
right? It's not safe.
Well, I think that's kind of what the premise of this episode is. Churches look at that, what she does. Churches look at what we do, and more so what she does. There's still some element of, oh, you guys are cool for us,
Right.
but they look at it and go, not only is that not safe, but they also look at it from the standpoint of, oh, their sin's going to rub off on you,
Right.
and
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
going to become a bad person.
Mhm.
Next thing you know, you're a stripper because you go
Right.
into strip clubs all the time,
Right.
and that's just not the case.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
The question that pops in my mind is, where would Jesus be in that story? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So y'all, scarlethope.org, I think is what it is. Go see Tammy. She's doing an amazing work, and we'll have her on an episode coming up soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember the moment, and I want to preface this, and I'll probably say this 100 times as we talk to different people, but anytime I say anything that sounds critical to the Sunday morning church, I don't mean it as critical.
Right. Yeah.
Like I mean it as expressed in love. But there was a moment where I knew that I didn't want to live the rest of my life like I was living when I actually was on staff at a Sunday morning church of about 600 people. And we spent an entire hour and a half of a Monday morning staff meeting trying to figure out how to communicate things in a way that would not make the biggest giver angry.
Yes.
And I remember thinking that spending that was one of the most miserable hour and a half time slots of my life, because I'm like, if I spend the rest of my life just trying to say things in a way that keeps the money coming in, I'm going to die a miserable person. And I'm not being critical about that particular church or that particular staff. I'm just saying, I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how not to make someone angry because they'll stop giving money.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I want
it
significance.
goes back to what's more valuable, the way this person feels about me, or this person over here that needs Jesus and needs rescue.
Right.
What's more important?
Mm-hmm.
What has the most eternal value? Obviously the way somebody views me or their opinion of me has no eternal value. And I was telling you this before. My wife and I were having a conversation one time, and she was, this was before we got married, and she was telling me that she wanted to start making a difference in people's life. And I remember this is the first time I said this out loud, and this was probably just a couple of years ago. I know it was just a couple of years ago. First, I thought, man, that's awesome, because that lines up with where my heart's at. But I remember saying to her, I think I said, that's awesome, but I think you need to know that living a life of service and doing some of these difficult things that no one else wants to do, it always costs you something.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something that you are having to give up to go do this rescue.
Right.
So whether it was financially, giving sacrificially, and by giving sacrificially, I don't mean I made a donation to the cause.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I used my gas money for the month to drive to the other end of the state, and it's like, okay, now I got to figure out where my gas money is going to come the rest of the month. Or it was, I remember 2 years in a row. You want to hear something crazy? 2 years in a row, I got the call about somebody that needed rescuing at my daughter's birthday party. 2 years in a row. So I actually ended up leaving my daughter's birthday party after I got the call to go on this rescue. And that's not to, hey, pat Glenn on the back, you did something awesome. That's just to illustrate, if you're going to be passionate about this and answer the call, there will be sacrifices. There will be time spent away from your family, economic sacrifices.
That reminds me, we've had this discussion a while back, but for you, how do you counterbalance? Like when you get a call and whether you decide to go or stay at wherever you're at, your child's birthday party, that could determine a person's life on the other side. But how do you counterbalance that with like nurturing your family?
For me, I've had this conversation with my wife. If there's ever a question of, are you going to go versus not go, the answer's always going to be, I'm going. Has that caused friction in my relationships? Absolutely. 100%. Where I try to balance that out or reconcile that is the times that I'm not on the go. I try to be super intentional about making that time that I am home or that I am wherever I'm at memorable and special and not just a mundane, Tuesday night. I try to make those times valuable because I am gone so much. I think that's where I kind of put more trust in that God's going to help protect me and my wife and my family from those things. But I also think it is a calling that God puts on my family to have the understanding. Does it suck? Absolutely. It's horrible. It sucks. But, my wife knew when she married me, this was part of who I am and what God's called me to do. And I think it means more. It might not at the time, but later in life, I know with because I have children that are grown now. I can't tell you how many baseball games and piano recitals and whatnot that I missed over the years. But looking back now that they're grown, they both are in careers where they serve people. They both have hearts of service. Yeah. They both would do anything for anybody in need. So I look at that now and I go, okay, what had more eternal value? Me being at a baseball game, or the fact that both of my children picked up on some of the stuff Dad was doing and are now living this life of service, continuing the kingdom effect.
And but even when you say that, I'm cringing on the inside as a dad. You know what I'm saying? Because I have kids from 8. I can only say this for this 1 month, so I have to get it out right now. But I have kids from 18 years old to 18 months old. So just knowing them and like where their hearts are, like that. There's just such a conflict. I think about too, though. I think about if I'm a firefighter, if that's what God had called me to do, then I would. If I got a call, I'd have to go, or if I'm surgeon or doctor or whatever. So there's people that have to be on call, and when they get called, they have to go.
Yeah.
And we probably minimize the fact that it's a faith thing. Like, well, this is not being a doctor or fireman or, policeman. This is, but what's more important than the kingdom of God, right?
Right. And don't get me wrong. It's never an easy choice to always choose to go. It never is. I mean, those videos on YouTube of, soldiers getting deployed or soldiers coming home and surprise, man, I got to where I can't watch them anymore. But, no soldier wants to leave their family for 18 months and go fight a war anywhere.
Yeah.
But it's their duty. It's what God's called them to do. And it's what they're going to do. And that's not easy on anybody, but without men and women who are faithful to the call, whatever that is for you, whether it's fighting human trafficking or joining the Marines, if you're faithful to the call, that's the kind of sacrifice that God requires. And I think a big reason for that is that's how that's how God weeds out the people who
Wow.
are really passionate about this and really feel called to it versus the people who are maybe doing certain things or starting organizations or whatever for other reasons
Yeah.
than
Mm,
the true intent of.
yeah. The Bible word believe is pistuo, the Greek word, and faith is pistis. So they're similar words. They're made up of kind of the same substance. And there's not an English word that is an equivalent. We in my kind of discipleship culture, we use the words all in, which is like nothing held back. Because when we say the word believe, what Americans or Westerners think is like an intellectual, you've given me bullet points and I've chosen to believe that that is true. But that's not the word that's used there. And the same thing with faith is like, I can have faith in what you're saying, but this is the kind of belief in faith, pistuo and pistis, where like every ounce of my being goes into this thing.
Yeah.
Nothing held back. I'm willing to die for it.
Yeah. Somebody was asking me, I forget the question now, but I remember the answer. We were sitting in Starbucks and I know what it was. We were talking about organizations, like I just said, that maybe another anti-trafficking organization. And I think the question was, how do I, as someone who wants to support those types of organizations, how do I tell the difference between the two? Like, how do I know which ones are legit, which ones are not?
Yeah.
And it basically came down to a who's bearing the most fruit.
Mm.
And then it also came down to sit down and have a conversation with some of the people in the organization. And I think the example I gave was, I said, everybody cares about children. Nobody wants a child to be trafficked, but are they passionate about it? And there just happened to be a homeless guy sitting outside the Starbucks. And I said, I care about that homeless guy. I want to go out there and meet whatever immediate need he has right now. But am I passionate about curing homelessness? I'm not. I care about homeless people, but that's not my passion.
Right.
My passion, I eat, sleep, dream rescuing trafficking victims.
Yeah.
And so I said that's how I gauge potential colleagues, when we're, trying to team up or whatever.
Yeah. I want to throw something else out. It's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's actually a really uncomfortable.
Okay.
But it just popped in my mind when you were talking. Previously, and kind of tied in with the whole trafficking thing, is just a passion to rescue children, right? You fought against child pornography in the state of Tennessee for a lot of years. Yeah. So we went camping a couple weeks ago together for a couple of days and just hung out, and because that's the best place for men to talk to each other.
Absolutely.
Around the campfire.
Around the campfire.
That's right. But you were just telling me that there was like a time where you had to view thousands of images of children being abused. And I just, like, I can't, even like to this day, I can't, there's been random times that I'm just driving down the road and I'm thinking, how in the world can a person sustain? And I know it's got to be very difficult and just wear you down, but that's something that you, in order to fight the battle, you had to engage in that. That's just in itself like this dichotomy.
Yeah. And you're not the first person that ever asked me that. Again, the simple answer, the quick answer I give people is, I don't know how I did it. I mean, all I can say is God did it, because I have no clue.
Yeah.
That's an unfortunate part of the job. And again, we always see things later in hindsight, but looking back, I can see the effects that it had on me from a physical standpoint, emotional standpoint, a biochemical, my brain standpoint. And I can see how all those things affected my relationships and everything else. It's not so obvious at the time because you're so out of
You're
whack.
in the fight. It's like
tune.
It's a fog of war, right?
Yeah,
Kinda like
but
war.
later on you see it, and I was very fortunate that I had some training early on, and not in how to completely keep no effects at all, but how to minimize some of that. And then I also had the forethought to surround myself with guys. I had friends. Most of my friends were in the mental health profession. So, I had guys kind of watching my back and checking in with me from time to time. I had a therapy dog.
Mm.
I equipped myself with, ways to kind of minimize it. That also probably gave me a little too much confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good. But yeah, looking back, I can definitely point out all the ways that it affected me. But in the end, working internet crimes against children brought me to working human trafficking,
Yeah.
which has brought me to where I am today. I don't regret it at all. There were a lot of children saved, not just by me, but by all the guys that do that. The number of children that are saved from that on a daily basis would blow your mind. I think God will honor that. I know He will, and
Yeah.
so I guess that's where you find your drive and your motivation to go. Is I said this to you today. We may not see it on this side of eternity, but we'll eventually we'll get to see the effect on the kingdom, and if we're obedient and do what we're called to do.
Yeah. The effect.
The effect.
Right. Not the effect. Yeah. It's mind boggling when I listen to someone that's chosen to give their life away for the sake of others. It always costs something, which is your point, right?
Yeah,
It always costs you something. And I'm sitting here listening to you right now, and inside my heart, there's a conflict that says, am I willing? And my calling is not yours, and it's not supposed to be yours. But where do I say I'm not interested? At what point in this struggle and what it's going to cost me personally to serve others am I going to turn my back and walk away? It's just, and I think we all need to ask that. I think every single person listening to this podcast needs to ask themselves that question and not be shamed by it. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's a point where, there's a point for all of us where we're going to say, that's where I walk. And that's okay. But at the same time, it shows you the place where you can actually grow to just one step farther down and going all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing. I may go all in over here, but say no over here.
Right.
And I think that's where God gives us that little thing inside that says, man, I can't sleep because all I can think about is all these children that I know that are out here being trafficked and sexually abused. And when that breaks your heart, and the only thing that gives you any peace is going out and trying to make a difference, to me, that was easy to say yes to, because that was the only way I found peace. But over here, an opportunity may come up to do something. But if I don't have that same little, man, my heart's breaking over this, then maybe that's the one I say no to.
Yeah. I mean, what do we say to the person that says, I've never felt that before? What do you say to the guy who says, I don't have any passion. I don't have any calling. I don't have anything that's burning and keeping me up at night.
I think I would say to that person a couple of things. One, be patient. Maybe God just hasn't revealed it to you yet. And two, ask God to reveal it to you. Be careful doing that.
I was going to say, what do you say to the guy who's afraid to ask God, which might be me, actually.
But yeah, I mean, here's the simple thing. Maybe God's not ignited that passion in you yet for that one thing. But the one thing God has called all of us to do is just love people. So whether you're at Starbucks or Old Navy or at your job, just love people. Just share your story with other people. Ask other people their story. Engage in conversation and just build those relationships.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, and a lot of times I think that passion can be revealed through those stories and through you sharing your stories. And maybe even hearing the people that we'll have on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this thing. And hopefully this will actually be a tool that people can use to engage themselves in these questions.
Yeah,
it's like, what does God call me to do? Where can I go all in with Him?
I think for you guys that are listening, please, in the comments, if you want to talk about, get more into this topic, maybe you've got a question, or maybe you just want to add to something we've said. Maybe you disagree with something we said. That's okay.
There's a lot to disagree with.
Yeah, there's a lot to disagree with.
There's a lot to disagree with.
We just kind of want this to be a place where people feel safe to come and share their story. Hopefully that'll inspire some people. It may make some people mad. If it does, just click the unfollow button.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you're on social, if you're watching us on the social, what if you just maybe want to tell a really brief story of a time when you said yes, when God asked you to do something and you said yes? That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, man. Like and share and all that stuff on the live video feeds and all that. Kevin and I are here for you guys. Again, shoot us a comment, private message, anytime you guys have a question. Maybe there's something you want us to talk about on the show. Maybe there is someone that would be good for us to go interview on the show. Just anything. So we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you for episode 2.
You've been listening to the Kingdom Effect podcast. The views expressed in this podcast are our opinion. Thanks for listening. Do us a favor and follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and like and share us on Facebook. We'll see you next time on the Kingdom Effect podcast.